She was just a girl when she first looked up at a human with eyes full of wonder and quiet fire. But when she returned years later, she was no longer a child. She was a warrior forged in storms, trained in silence, and driven by a single promise: to come back for the one who saw her when no one else did. What happens when fate, love, and war collide across the stars? Stay with us to find out. And hey, if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and show a thumbs up by liking the video. Now let's dive into this unforgettable story. The market on the moon of Delira buzzed with strange voices, glowing signs, and the scent of heated metal and fruit smoke. It was a place where humans and aliens crossed paths, traded stories, and sometimes forgot where they came from. Kyle, a young explorer from Earth, stood near his parked scout ship, brushing dust from his boots. His missions were simple: gather reports, help with trade routes, and stay out of anything too complicated. But that day, something different happened. He noticed her. She was standing a few meters away, quiet and still. A young girl, maybe 11 or 12 in human years, though it was hard to guess with her kind. She had soft lilac skin and long, pale hair that shimmered like frost. Her eyes, silver and glowing faintly, held something Kale couldn't quite name, something old and heavy, like she'd lived far more than her years. At first he thought she was just another local child curious about off-worlders, but then she kept following him, through the trading lanes, past the spice stalls, down into the lower docks, always a few steps behind, never speaking, never looking away. Finally, Kale stopped. He turned and crouched in front of her. "Hey," he said gently. "What's your name?" She blinked slowly. "Reha." Her voice was soft but sure. Kale studied her face. She was young, but those eyes, they weren't the eyes of a child. They were deep, calm, and filled with something unspoken. "You've been following me," Kyle said with a half smile. "Why?" Reha looked down, then back up at him. "You helped that trader earlier, the old man with the limp." Kale blinked. He barely remembered the moment. He had lifted some heavy crates off a broken cart and helped the man to his stall. That was nothing. It wasn't nothing to him, Reha said simply. Kyle felt something shift in the air between them. She wasn't here for a favor or food. She was here because something about that moment had meant everything to her. And suddenly he didn't know what to say. He looked around. The sun was dipping behind the outer rim towers, casting the market in long shadows. He sighed and looked her in the eyes. "Reha, you're still really young. There's a whole galaxy out there waiting for you. Adventures, lessons, even pain. You've got to go out there and become someone. Someone strong. Someone real." She tilted her head, puzzled. Kyle continued, softer now. "Come back when you know who you are. Maybe then we can talk again." There was a long silence. Reha just stared at him, unmoving. Then without a word, she nodded once. No protest, no argument. She turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowded streets. Kale stood there for a moment, watching the space she'd left behind. Then he shook his head and walked back toward his ship. "She'll forget," he muttered, mostly to himself. That night, under a quiet sky, Kyle sat by a small campfire just outside the ship's landing pad. Sparks drifted into the air like lazy stars. He poked the fire with a stick, lost in thought. He had met hundreds of people across dozens of worlds, but something about Reha stayed in his mind like a whisper. Her eyes, her silence, her strange, calm presence. "She's just a kid," he said out loud, trying to shake it off. But far away, in the shadows of the market's closing stalls, Reha had not forgotten. She stood alone, watching the stars rise behind the towers, and she whispered Kale's words to herself. "Come back when you know who you are." She didn't understand love. Not fully. She didn't know why his voice stayed with her, why the memory of his kindness felt warm when everything else in her life had been cold. But she knew this. she would return. One day. And when she did, he would look at her, not as a child, but as someone who mattered. Years passed. On the storm-covered moon of Taranox, where warrior clans trained under lightning and fire, a young girl arrived. She was small, quiet, and strange to the others, but she trained harder than anyone. When she fell, she got back up. When they mocked her, she stayed silent. When they hurt her, she bled and kept moving. Because every night she whispered the same thing. Come back when you know who you are. And she was learning. With every bruise, every broken bone, every drop of sweat and fear, Rhea became someone else. Not just stronger, but focused. Dangerous. Alive. Kyle, meanwhile, continued his missions. He explored new routes, fixed broken systems, and tried to forget the strange girl from Delira. But sometimes when the nights were quiet and the stars hung low, he saw her silver eyes in his dreams. He never knew how much his words had shaped another's future. He had no idea what she was becoming. But Rhea knew, and the stars knew, and the promise in her eyes still burned bright. The training grounds of Taranox were not made for the weak. Every path was carved from black rock, and lightning often split the sky without warning. The air smelled of smoke and iron. Warriors from across the galaxy came here to prove themselves. But most did not survive long. That's why, when Rhea arrived, no one paid her much attention. She was small, quiet, and looked far too soft for a place like this. Her clothes were simple, her eyes steady, and her voice almost never used. The other trainees laughed. Some even tried to scare her off. They called her a ghost girl, said she wouldn't last a week. But Rhea didn't come to be liked. She came to change. Master Fenar, a towering warrior with old scars and a voice like thunder, watched her closely. At first, he didn't expect much. She didn't argue. She didn't fight back when pushed. She simply listened, learned, and tried again. Every day, Rhea trained from sunrise to well past dark. When the others collapsed, she stayed standing. When her arms shook from pain, she bit down and lifted her weapon again. Every strike, every step, every fall, she remembered Kale's voice in her mind. Come back when you know who you are. She didn't just want to become strong. She wanted to become someone who would be seen, someone worth remembering. The girl from Delira no longer existed. Rhea was shaping herself into something new, one bruise at a time. There were many trials on Taranox, tests of strength, speed, and focus. Rhea failed many of them at first, but each failure taught her something. She learned how to breathe through pain, how to read her opponent's body, how to stay calm even when fire rained from the sky. Slowly, the mocking stopped. Slowly, others began to notice that she never gave up, that she moved like someone with a purpose larger than herself. Tira, another trainee, once tried to knock Rhea down during a sparring match. Rhea fell hard, her shoulder bleeding, but she stood up before anyone could count to 3. Tira stared at her, confused. Why don't you quit? She asked. Rhea only replied, because someone told me to come back stronger. From that day on, Tira never tried to mock her again. At night, when the warriors slept beneath thick metal blankets to guard against the cold, Rhea sat alone in the war temple. She had a small chest made of folded metal. Inside it was her most secret treasure, a faded hologram. It was old, a little broken, but still clear enough. It showed Kyle, caught mid-smile, standing near his ship on that dusty trade moon. She had captured it secretly. She'd watched it 1,000 times. Some nights when her muscles ached and her spirit felt thin, she would whisper to it, I'm getting close. I'm almost ready. Master Fenar began to change his tone. He stopped shouting at her. He watched her moves more carefully. One day he even nodded after a tough battle. You're different, he told her. You fight like someone trying to keep a promise. Rhea didn't answer, but her grip on the training staff tightened. Years passed. Her body changed. Her skin darkened slightly under the harsh moons of Taranox. Her movements became quicker, more dangerous. The shy girl was gone. In her place stood a warrior with fire in her steps and steel in her bones. And yet Rhea held on to the one thing that made her different from the others, her heart. There was still warmth behind her silver eyes. She never laughed when others were hurt. She never struck when someone was already down. That quiet kindness made her feared even more than her skill, because no one could understand how someone could be strong and gentle at the same time. Then came the final trial. It was called the Shatter Match. The winner could leave Taranox, the loser might not get up again. Rhea's opponent was Brook, a beast of a warrior with shoulders like boulders and eyes full of pride. He laughed when he saw her. "They send a girl to face me? This is a joke." Rhea said nothing. She simply stepped onto the stone platform and bowed once. The gong sounded. Brook charged like a thunderbeast. The crowd roared, expecting Rhea to be crushed in seconds. But she moved like wind over stone, graceful, fast, and impossible to catch. Brook's swings met nothing but air. Then, with 3 quick steps, Rhea closed the distance, struck the side of his knee, rolled behind him, and brought her staff. Across his spine, Brook dropped with a shout, stunned. Rhea stood above him, her breath steady, her eyes calm. The crowd was silent. Then came a whisper. Her name. She had done it. The elders nodded and stepped forward. One of them asked where she would go now. Rhea only gave one answer. To find someone. Far away, Kyle sat on a peaceful outpost near a nebula gate. He flipped through mission reports, unaware that his quiet words to a strange girl so long ago had sparked a fire he could not yet see. But Rhea was coming, and she was not a child anymore. The stars outside the human outpost shimmered like slow-burning candles, hanging over the metal decks of Station Orion. Kyle leaned back in his chair, sipping something bitter from a dented mug. His days had grown quiet. Reports came in. Supplies went out. He fixed engines and helped with trade logs, nothing dangerous, nothing meaningful. But sometimes, especially in the stillness of night, his thoughts drifted to a pair of silver eyes from long ago, a market, a girl, a moment he'd almost forgotten, until recently. For weeks now, she'd been slipping into his dreams, though he didn't know why. The peace of the station broke suddenly. Alarms echoed through the halls. An unknown ship had docked without warning. Its surface was black and smooth, marked with a silver crest, a warrior's symbol from a far-off world. No weapons drawn, no demands made. Just silence. Kale was already in the docking bay when the ramp lowered. A figure walked out, tall and still. She wore deep gold armor, polished but scarred. A long dark cloak trailed behind her like smoke. She moved with purpose, each step steady and silent. Then she removed her hood. Kyle froze, silver eyes. He didn't speak, couldn't speak, his breath caught and the world tilted slightly. The girl he had once knelt in front of was gone. In her place stood a woman with a presence so strong it filled the room. "Kyle," she said quietly. It was her voice. Different now, lower, steadier, but still her. "I've come back." Kale opened his mouth, closed it, then tried again. You're Rhea," she finished. The name hit him like a slow wave. He remembered it. Of course he remembered it. He had never truly let it go. "You grew up," he said. "You told me to." The words carried no anger, no pain, only truth. People around them whispered. A warrior from the moon of Taranox had just appeared without notice. She hadn't spoken to anyone else. Just Kale. Later, in the station's council chamber, the room buzzed with cautious voices. Commander Lysa, a sharp-minded officer with years of experience, leaned toward Kale. "She's here under peaceful terms," she said. "But we're not sure we believe that. Taranox warriors never show up alone unless they have a reason." Kyle stayed quiet. He remembered Rhea's eyes as a child, curious and filled with something gentle. Now they were calm, sharper maybe, but still carrying that same hidden warmth. That evening, he found her standing alone on the station's viewing deck. She looked out at the stars, her expression unreadable. "They look different from here," she said softly. Cale stood beside her. "You surprised me today." "I meant to." She turned and met his gaze. "You forgot me." "I didn't," he replied. "I just didn't expect this. I came back, like you asked." Cale gave a small, sheepish nod. "I didn't know those words would stay with you." "They became my reason to keep going," Reha said. "When they hurt me, I remembered your voice. When I felt like I had nothing, I remembered the way you looked at me." His heart beat faster. He had never meant to give anyone a mission in life. But there she was, living proof that his kindness had become something greater. "You've become amazing," Cale whispered. Reha smiled just slightly. "Does that mean you'll see me now, not as a child, but as who I am?" Cale met her eyes. Silver pools filled with strength and something else. Devotion. "I see you," he said, voice low. Before either of them could speak again, alarms rang through the station. A distress signal was coming from a transport ship caught near a collapsing star tunnel. Its systems were failing. No one had the time or resources to prepare a proper rescue. Kyle turned to the screen. Radiation was spiking. The crew didn't have much longer. "We go now," Reha said, already adjusting her armor. "The risk is too high," the commander warned. "We can't send a full team." Kyle didn't hesitate. "Then we'll go alone." The commander looked at the two of them, one human, one alien warrior. There was something strange in their eyes. Trust, focus, fire. He nodded. "Don't expect a rescue. You'll be on your own." The shuttle roared through plasma clouds, shaking from pressure. Reha piloted with steady hands, her eyes glowing, faintly as she scanned for the lost ship. Kyle sat behind her checking the supplies. "You ever done a zero-light jump into a gravity sink?" he asked. Reha smirked. "I trained in lava tunnels. This is softer." Kyle laughed nervously. "You're still terrifying, I know." Then through the swirling mist the ship appeared, a broken shadow floating in space. The light warden. Its lights were out. No movement. Kyle and Reha landed carefully and stepped into the dark corridors. They found the survivors, 5 humans, 2 of them children, huddled in a sealed room barely breathing. Kale gave them oxygen. Reha sealed the room with shields. "You came," whispered a little girl, her eyes wide. Kale smiled. "Of course we did." Suddenly, the ship shook. A deep growl echoed down the hall. Metal screeched. Something else was here. Kale drew his weapon. "What was that?" Reha narrowed her eyes. "Not natural. We are not alone." They had come to save others, but now they would have to fight to save themselves. The stars outside flickered like nervous hearts. And deep inside the wreckage, a silent danger waited to meet them. The ship groaned under the pressure of the collapsing star tunnel as Kale and Reha moved through its broken corridors, guiding the frightened survivors toward the docking bay. Lights flickered, alarms screamed. Time was slipping through their fingers like sand in a storm. Kale kept one eye on the children, the other on Reha. Her armor was cracked, her shoulder bleeding from the last fight. But she didn't slow down. She walked ahead, protective, focused like nothing else mattered but getting these people out alive. Just before they reached the shuttle, a loud crash echoed from above. Something dropped from the ceiling, metal claws slamming into the floor. It was huge, part machine, part beast, its eyes glowing red like molten stone. Kale barely had time to shout before it charged. He fired, but the creature batted him aside like a rag doll. He hit the wall hard, gasping for air. Reha didn't run. She stood in front of the survivors, cloak torn, spear in hand. The monster roared and lunged. She waited. Then, at the last second, she leapt sideways, ran up the wall, and launched herself onto its back. With a sharp cry, she drove her blade into the creature's neck. Sparks flew. The thing howled but didn't fall. It slammed itself against the wall, throwing her off. Reha hit the ground hard. She didn't get up. Kyle pushed himself to his feet, vision blurry. He saw the creature turning toward her limp body, claws raised. Something inside him snapped. He grabbed a broken rod from the floor, ran forward, and plunged it into the beast's chest. It screamed and collapsed in a heap of metal and ash. Kale dropped the rod and rushed to Reha. She was bleeding badly, her breathing shallow. "Reha," he said, voice shaking. "Look at me. Stay with me." She opened her eyes, weak but steady. "You jumped in front of it," she whispered. "You think I'd let you do all the saving?" Kale replied, forcing a smile. She gave a faint laugh, then winced. They carried the survivors to the shuttle and took off, leaving the dead ship behind. But fate had one more twist. A second hidden creature had launched an EMP burst during their escape. The shuttle's systems went dark. No power, no signal. They were alone in space, drifting through the quiet black. Inside the tiny escape pod, oxygen levels were dropping. The children had been transferred to another pod that launched first, but Kyle and Reha remained behind, the damaged pod floating with no control. Kale tried the controls again. Nothing. He looked over at Reha, sitting quietly, her back against the cold metal wall. Her shoulder was still wrapped in bandages, and her breath was slower than before. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded. "I've had worse." "You always say that." They sat in silence. Not the kind that feels empty, but the kind that feels heavy, like it's holding something unspoken. Minutes passed, maybe hours. It was impossible to tell anymore. Kale turned to her and spoke softly. "You really waited all these years? Just because of what I said?" Reha's silver eyes opened slowly. "Yes." Kale blinked. "I was only trying to be kind to a scared kid. I didn't think you'd take it so seriously." "I did," she said. "No one had ever been kind to me before." He looked down, guilt pressing on his chest. "I didn't know. I never meant to give you false hope." "It wasn't false," she said gently. "You told me to come back when I knew who I was. So I became better, stronger, wiser. I thought maybe one day you'd see me." Kale met her gaze. "I see you now, Reha." She took a shaky breath. "Not as the girl you once saved?" "No," he whispered. "As the woman who just saved me." Oxygen warning lights blinked. The air was thinning fast. Reha leaned her head back against the pod wall, eyes half closed. "Even when I was learning to fight and when I was learning to kill, you were the only soft memory I had." Kyle reached out and held her hand. It was still warm, still strong. "If we don't make it," he said quietly, "there's something I need you to know." Reha turned her head toward him, eyes searching. "You changed me," he said. "I used to live day by day with no ties. But when you came back, I felt alive again." She squeezed his hand gently. "I used to think love was weakness," she said. "But now I think it's strength." Kale smiled, eyes misty. "Then maybe we both got stronger." Suddenly a faint ping came from the console. Kale shot forward. A weak signal. He tapped the screen, turned knobs, boosted the signal. "Rescue team," a voice crackled through. "If alive, respond." Kale shouted back, "We're here, 2 alive, lock onto us now." Reha closed her eyes and smiled. They had a chance. 30 minutes later, the rescue ship pulled their pod inside. Medics rushed in. Kale was stable. Reha was not. Her injuries had grown worse. Her body pushed past its limits. As they placed her on the stretcher, Kale held her hand one last time. "You didn't just come back," he said softly. "You brought me back too." Her eyes flickered open, her voice just a whisper. "I'm not leaving again." Back at the station, Kyle stayed beside her recovery pod every day. He didn't leave, not even once. When she finally opened her eyes again, the first thing she saw was him, and the first thing she heard was his voice. Quiet, but full of everything she had waited for. "When you're ready," he said, "I'm here."